Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekly reading report. It's time for my weekly reading report, that thrill-packed program where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. And, Roger, I did read some stuff. Not as much stuff as I would have liked, because as usual, things were pretty busy. Hope everybody is keeping warm. Pretty rough storm going on through a lot of the United States. Not here. We're in California. We don't have to worry about that. But yeah, some people are going through a hard time right now. I hope your power is on and all of that. But what did I read? That's what we're here for, Roger. What did I read? Okay, so I will break out my list for the 500 book challenge. The ongoing, everlasting challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones. Where are we at? Okay, so the last book I talked about was book 332, Doc Savage, The Meteor Menace. It's The Meteor Menace. That was an awesome book. So that brings us to 333. And this is a book I actually got in the mail as a gift. And gifts count, of course, for the challenge, Roger, because I own them, but I didn't buy them. So what did I get and what did I read? So this is the new history of the DC universe, which a friend of mine sent me along with a note that said something to the effect of, I hope this makes DC history or DC continuity less confusing. So DC Comics continuity and DC Comics history is notoriously incomprehensible because they've rebooted their continuity and their history like a dozen times in a dozen big comic book events. So it's a little incomprehensible. And so DC hired Mark Waid, he's a very good comic book writer, Mark Waid. They hired him to sort everything out and figure out what the new continuity is, or what the current continuity is, and the current history is for the characters in the DC universe. And Mark Waid is the right guy to do it because he's read like every DC comic book, at least according to him. And he's a big fan. He's a big fan of this stuff. So he wrote it, and there are a bunch of different artists who drew it. And they did a pretty good job. This is Dan Jurgens there doing Superman, of course. This is the period where Superman died and later came back to life back in the 90s. And so I have a lot of thoughts about this, and most of them I will tell you tomorrow, because tomorrow is Epic Comic Book Wednesday, and this is going to be Epic Comic Book Wednesday, the new history of the DC Universe. I will say, if you didn't know anything about the DC Universe and you tried to read this, or even if you do know something, it's a bit incomprehensible, much like DC Comics history itself. Also, despite what the title says, it's not a history. So history, if you're writing a history, it's not just a series of events. You have to interpret the events you're talking about. You have to examine the events you're talking about. And this doesn't do that. This is a simple chronicle, really. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this person showed up, and then this person, and then this person, and then this person, and then this happened, and then this happened. That's what this is, basically. It's a chronicle and a sort of timeline, just to let you know what happened. Okay, this is what actually happened in the history, or in the timeline, as the case may be. Without any dates, by necessity, there are no dates telling you when these things happened, because this has to last as long as possible. Also, unfortunately, because of that, you really don't know how long it took between, how much time there was between the different events that they're talking about in this book. So it has its issues, but there's good stuff in this and some bad stuff in this. And I'll talk more about this for Epic Comic Book Wednesday tomorrow. So yeah, this is book 333. That brought me to book 334, which is this book, which is fantastic. This is Tarzan the Terrible with this awesome Boris Vallejo cover. Tarzan the Terrible, the 8th book in the Tarzan series. So I'm going through every book by Edgar Rice Burroughs, more or less in the order that he wrote them. And this was the next book on the list, Tarzan the Terrible. In the last book, Tarzan the Untamed, which took place during World War I, German soldiers arrived at Tarzan's bungalow in Africa, Lord Greystoke's bungalow, or ranch house, or whatever it was, and killed everybody, and seemed to have killed Jane. There was a body with Jane's wedding ring on it, and it seemed to be Jane. Of course it wasn't Jane, but it seemed to be, and Tarzan believed that his wife had been killed by the Germans, and so he went out for revenge. Once again, he shed the trappings of civilization and went out as Tarzan, got his bows, his bow and arrow, and his rope and his knife, and he just went out after the Germans. And indeed, he got his terrible revenge. It was an excellent book, Tarzan the Untamed. And by the end of the book, spoiler alert, you find out that Jane is actually alive and in the custody of the one remaining German who was involved with that operation that Tarzan didn't kill. And he's on the run from Tarzan, and he's got Jane as his, hostage. And so Tarzan follows her into the depths of the African jungle where he discovers a lost civilization. Tarzan stumbles across many lost civilizations. They're all over Africa at this period, apparently. So this becomes a Lost World novel where Tarzan stumbles upon Pal Uldan, which is a lost world cut off from the rest of Africa by big mountains and swamps and impenetrable bogs and everything else. So you have to really try to get in here, or have an airplane. I guess you could do it that way, but it's rough getting into this territory. And once you get there, there are giant dinosaurs because the really good Lost Worlds have giant dinosaurs. So there is that, and there are also literally monkey people. They're human beings basically, but their hands and feet are like monkeys, so they can climb real good. And they also have tails. And some of them have fur, and some of them don't. And so there are different tribes of these people in this lost world. Some, of course, become Tarzan's friends. Some his enemies. He gets involved in the intricate politics of this area while he's trying to find Jane, because Jane is somewhere in this lost world. Does he find her? Well, I guess you have to read the book to find out. It is fantastic. This book is everything you want a Tarzan novel to be. It's packed full of action and adventure. The pace is relentless. It's really interesting. Edgar Rice Burroughs, he shows off his abilities as a writer of adventure, and he has a lot of his humor in this book as well. It's just tremendously entertaining. One of the best Tarzan novels, I think. Tarzan the Terrible. The next Tarzan book, I think, is Tarzan and the Golden Lion. Yeah. Tarzan and the Golden Lion comes after this, which I remember being pretty good. The next book I have to read from Edgar Rice Burroughs, though, I don't have the list in front of me. But if I'm remembering correctly, it's The Chessmen of Mars, which I remember being a pretty good book as well. So this was fantastic. This was book 334. Loved it. I had read it previously when I was a teenager, I think, but it's been a long time since I'd read that book. Which brings us to book 335, which is The Amazing Spider-Man, Great Responsibility. It's Great Responsibility, which follows the first volume Great Power was the first volume. And so this is the second Epic collection. It covers the years 1964 to 1966, and it covers the second half of Steve Ditko's run as an artist on Spider-Man. Stan Lee was writing the book, of course. Steve Ditko was illustrating it, and it was great, man. It was just fantastic. Tremendous fun. Unfortunately, Steve Ditko got disgruntled in his period with Marvel at this point. He felt like he wasn't given enough credit, I think. Possibly he doesn't feel like he was paid enough. Who knows? Who knows, really? But he left. He left Marvel Comics. And this was some of his best work in this book. These are some of the best issues of Spider-Man ever in this first run from Stan Lee with Steve Ditko. And it's unfortunate that it didn't last longer than it did. And the last issue that he drew, let me see if I could find it in here. It was this one. And he drew the interiors, but he didn't draw the cover. So they had to cobble together a couple. They had to cobble together a cover just from selections from the interior artwork. And so they grabbed an illustration of Spider-Man from inside the comic, and all those scenes are from inside the comic because, he didn't bother to draw a cover. He just left. And the artwork itself in the final issue looks really phoned in. It's like you could tell by this last issue that Steve Ditko just didn't care. And he was just like, you know what? Whatever, I'm leaving. And the inking is rough. The artwork is rough. And so it actually looks like somebody else did the inking on it. But from everything I see, it was Steve Ditko who did it. He was just like, I'm done. Here, take these pages, I'm leaving. I think that's pretty much how it went. The good thing is that the next issue is drawn by John Romita, who turned out to be the greatest Spider-Man artist of all, John Romita. And his run was legendary. And it was so good that, artists for a long time just kind of copied his style or drew Spider-Man in the John Romita style for years afterwards. So that I'm looking forward to. But yeah, done with the Steve Ditko era. It was fantastic. This comic book is properly titled. It is an amazing book. So yeah, The Amazing Spider-Man, Great Responsibility was fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading the next one, which I'll probably start on today. Okay, what else did I read? Well, I've also been reading Superman because I read Superman every day. And I've been reading stories from this. This is the Superman Action Comics Omnibus by Dan Jurgens, Volume 1, where the new 52 Superman has died and he's been replaced by the Superman from the previous universe. See, I told you DC Comics continuity is incomprehensible. It's a pretty good comic book, though. It's fantastic. And where am I up to in this thing? Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah. Doomsday seems to be back. So I'm reading that. But I'm also reading other Superman comics on the iPad, on DC Infinite. I'm also reading a bunch of old Superman comics from the late 80s and early 90s. The whole run that came after John Byrne left the book. And so I'm going through all of those old comics, which is tremendous fun. And next thing I'm reading here is Action Comics 650, which was supposed to be an extra big, extra special issue. There's Jimmy Olsen running away from bizarre trouble, as usual. So this has been fun. So I've been reading this stuff as well. And I am also reading Sherlock Holmes. So I just started A Study in Scarlet. Usually when I read Sherlock Holmes, because I read Sherlock Holmes a few times before, usually when I read Sherlock Holmes, I'll just read the whole thing. You know, I'll start at the first published book and go to the last published book. They're all in this collection, The Complete Sherlock Holmes. That's usually how I do it. Read the whole canon all at once. But now I'm on BookTube and I have all kinds of other things I have to do. Not only do I have the 500 book challenge, there are monthly events and there are certain series that I'm reading a book every month, and there's lots of stuff going on. So I thought this time I would just go a book at a time. And this month I'm reading A Study in Scarlet, which was a short little book, but it is the book where Sherlock Holmes and Watson first meet. And we first see Sherlock Holmes at his job as a consulting detective. And it is the first adventure chronicled by Watson. And so I just read the part where Sherlock Holmes and Watson meet. And it's really interesting and it's really fun. It's been a couple years since I read it, so this is a book I'm very familiar with. But I wanted to revisit Sherlock Holmes. Actually, it's been more than a couple of years. How long have I been on BookTube, Roger? 5 years? Something like that? So it's been over that. It's been over that. So it's been a while, actually. But it is a book I'm very familiar with. And so I just started that, so I'll talk more about that next week. But there was The Study in Scarlet and then The Sign of Four, which are two short novels. And then that's when Sherlock Holmes started getting popular after that. Because after that, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a series of Sherlock Holmes short stories that appeared in the Strand magazine. And that's where he became very popular. Hugely popular, in fact. So popular that when, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to murder him and kill him off, he couldn't do it. He had to bring him back, Roger. Back from the dead, like somebody else I know. So, yeah, I'll tell you a lot more about The Study in Scarlet next week after I finish it. But that is what I'm reading at this moment. And I think that's everything. I will catch you next time. Stay tuned tomorrow for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. I'll have something else up later on this week. Okay, guys, I will see you then.